How's it going, everybody? And today I just want to have some fun. Not really because I'm actually in physical pain and shouldn't be doing this, but I have free time. And, so there's that. Not that long ago, a YouTuber called Lavader made a video why socialists never give up. If you don't know who Lavader is a semi-constitutional monarchist. And in YouTube, he is the largest monarchist YouTube channel when it comes to subscriber count. And like I said earlier, he subscribed to semi-constitutional monarchy. He does believe that monarchy is the best form of government. I, as an anarchist or anarchist communist, obviously disagree on that. But that's not a point here and there. The point that he did a video called Why Do Socialists Never Give Up? To be more specific, he's focusing on the Marxist tradition, which I already did multiple videos critiquing Marxism. My book, The Failure of Religion and Politics, I criticize basically any form of socialism that subscribes to hierarchy. So basically, anything that is not anarchist, pretty much. So there's that. And let's see, there are cases that we may find some agreement, despite our fundamental opposition in many views. The first part of his video about why do socialists never give up, he's talk about that all people who are considered counter-revolutionaries, and he is considered himself as a counter-revolutionary in some cases, they believe that either socialism never worked, although he did specify some socialists in certain regions can work, but he's focusing more on the Marxist tradition, right? And and to be more specific, he does believe that socialism, regardless, that never gave both equal society with no exploitation. Here's the problem with that statement. That statement is only true if we talk about exclusively to socialists who do believe in hierarchy. So Marxists, democratic socialists, este, basically anybody who is not an anarchist. Every time we see a example of socialism slash communism that actually does work almost without fail, it's been on the anarchist tradition. We see examples of revolutionary Spain from the CNTFIA, the Ukrainian Free Territory, the Zapatistas, Rojava, the Majurian Korean people, the anarchist society, the geographic location of Somia, which is the size of Europe, geographically speaking, with a population of 200 million people, and they've been living like that for around 2,000 years. And 99% of human history has functioned under what we consider nowadays an anarchist communist society, where hyper-egalitarianism, non-hierarchical, decentralized, horizontal structure. And there's equality in democratic decision making. So we see that everywhere, but only in the anarchist society. The only times when a non-anarchist approach to socialism does work, it tends to be more on the libertarian side. Like for example, in India, Kerala, which is controlled by the communists. But unlike the more traditional Marxists, they emphasize more on decentralization. Or if you want to go to the more traditional Marxist approach, you have Yugoslavia, which has market base, is a mixed economy, but they still have some problems. I already mentioned this before about various cases. But like I said, like the less hierarchical you are with socialism, you do achieve equality, what he's trying to look for. But I get it's either two things. One, he is not familiar with the literature of anarchists or the history of it, or well, three things. My mistake. That's the first one. The second one, he's not familiar with the academic consensus among archaeologists and anthropologists called the egalitarian human origin thesis, which, like I said, humans have evolved pretty much to be anarchist communists. We see that 99% of human history and how they treated fairly, there was actual equality in democratic decision making. Or three, which I hope that's not the case. I want to be genuine with him. The third one is probably he's lying and he's misinforming people about that. Although I hope that's not the case. I'm pretty sure he's either not aware of it or ignorant of it, not malice about it. Although he also focused about the argument that that's not real socialism slash socialism has ever tried. He's focusing exclusively on the Leninist tradition and all versions that came from the Leninist tradition, mainly Stalinism and Maoism, which I consider horrific. And like I said, well, either he doesn't know, or like most economists agree and experts of the history of the Soviet Union and Maoist era China, that it was never socialist to begin with under the Marxist understanding of it. It was capitalism from start to finish. In fact, in many cases, I did a basically 5-part video about how Stalin was a capitalist collaborator and, you know, improve capitalism, restore capitalism in many cases. It does include Maoist China as well. They were capitalists from beginning to end. As I lay away before years ago on my book, the entire Soviet world is capitalist, in the more specific state capitalist. Why? Let's start with the Soviet Union. When Lenin's interpretation of Marx was the communist is born from capitalism, then society must transition from capitalism to socialism, and then socialism to communism, which is predicting the end of history by using Marxist historiography and Marxist philosophy of history. The first stage is a violent revolution to gain control of the state and put the party in charge. As long there is a state, if the capitalism there is capitalism. Because if Mikhail Bakunin has made it clear that state socialism is state capitalism. Putting the industry under state control instead of public ownership of the means of production, which many socialists, not just anarchists, if the was state ownership, they know that the state ownership of the means of production, which is capitalism. Even Friedrich Engels has stated in Socialism, Utopia Scientific that the state ownership of the means of production is not the solution. Thus, the Soviet Union never went beyond a state capitalism phase because of the both World Wars and the Cold War. Lenin himself established state capitalism by arguing that capitalist development was necessary. And according to him, state monopoly capitalism inevitably and avoidably implies a step and more than one step towards socialism. And Lenin used Germany as an example of his state capitalist model. This is during the Weimar era and Maoist social market economy, where Mao admitted that China was state capitalist during his reign in a pamphlet called On Capitalism. At the same time with Deng Xiaoping's policy, North Korea's state socialism, Laos' Soviet-style state enterprise, Castro's policy, and all Soviet were on the extension of Lenin's state capitalist economic policy. And their approach of the plan economy, a centralized plan economy, has been copied in Walmart, Amazon, the Pentagon, and various banks throughout the capitalist world. Hell, Vladimir Lenin is heavily used by Henry Ford approach to management called Taylorism and called it one-man management, which I already said laid the groundwork for fascist-style organization the Mussolini will adopt. In fact, before even Karl Marx started his revolutionary ideas in his beliefs and philosophy, there was an early debate among socialists, anarchists, and non-anarchists. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon did debates with Louis Blanc, who was an early example of reformist socialist. And in the Properties Fed and Anthology, which focuses autobiography, they lay clear why hierarchical, centralized, authoritarian approach to socialism leads to capitalism in the end. And I quote, Proudhon continually stressed that state control of the means of production was a danger to liberty of the worker and simply the continuation of capitalism with the state as the new boss. He rejected the call of certain utopians that the government cease trade, industry, and agriculture to add them to the attributes and to make the French nation a nation of wage workers. Nationalization will simply be more wage slavery. The net result of state socialism will be a combat democracy simply rooted in dictatorship of the masses, where the masses merely had the opportunity to consider universal slavery in accordance with formulas and guidelines borrowed from the former absolutism, invisibility of power, vicarious centralization, systematic demolition of all individuals, cooperation local thought, these being deemed source of discourse, and the inquisitorial policing. Proudhon fears of the efficiency of state socialism and that would lead to more than state capitalist tyranny became all too real under Leninism. His prediction that reformist socialism would simply postpone the abolition of exploitation indefinitely while paying capitalist interests and divided was also proven all too correct and what could be seen with the British Labour Party post-war nationalization. So as we can see that what he's critiquing is not technically true because socialism does work, but it's usually under anarchism. or he's focused about the Marxists. The reason they say socialists never try because they never really got the chance to do socialist style economics because they always got stuck in capitalist production or their specific approach leads to the extreme version of capitalism. He also focused about George Sorel, although I will talk to we can talk about him later. But let's focus about the concept of myth. He points to an example of Christianity, even though he is considered himself on the right and counter-revolutionary in his own admission. The problem is there are scholarship that point to Christianity that was originally a pacifist, egalitarian, proto-anarchist, belief. Without again, there's gonna be a lot of social description about that one, and also like the egalitarian human or just DC and stuff like that. So if you don't want to watch this video, if Lavader, if you somehow stumble upon this and you watch this video but you don't want to hear my este indigenous Taino voice and my ADHD, and if I sound weird because I'm literally in pain because I pulled three muscles, don't ask how. Just use the description yourself. um, as well, also again, George, they also point about like, oh, people are going to conversion again, young people. We're millennials are one of the least religious generations of all generations right now. In fact, in religious people, which is a broad category, which includes the people who do believe in God but they're not followers of any religion. So atheists, agnostics, theists of various kinds, etc. They comprise 16.5% of the global population. If religious people, if it was considered a religion, they are the third biggest group in the world. Atheism in particular is like 7% of the world's population, so it's on the rise. He also points out that the communists and socialists on the Marxist tradition were wrong because we're living better than all previous generation. That's actually not true. It depends what do you mean by that term. If we talk about better in the sense of if the like the reduction of violence and stuff like that, then technically yes, we live in the most peaceful. But if we talk about economics, like no, it's getting worse. Like it's been studied heavily that this we are living right now is one of the worst examples of inequalities in the world. That we are living in the second Gilded Age. In fact, Thomas Piketty had did expensive study of this. In fact, even though China, during Xi Jinping, has praised Thomas Piketty's previous works, when his newest work, Capital Ideology, when he did a chapter dedicated to China, exposing that China is a capitalist society with extreme inequality, even though being the richest country in the world, but purely monetarily, that there are 600 million people in poverty, and over half of all female suicide are from poor, rural, non-urban women in China. And they banned the book because it shows that China is capitalist. Instead of communist, they often declare themselves as such. And he did previous video because thankfully, even though he's a monarch, he's an anti-fascist. So you are my friend pretty much, or frenemies. Frenemies to lovers? Okay. But the point is that, if the fascists are by default anti-capitalist, they will use socialistic elements for their own means. The closest you're ever gonna get to a quote unquote socialist in National Socialism, whatever form fascism, is social democracy, right? For example, in the Free State of Fume, right, it was considered the first fascist state, even though it didn't have a state. It was heavily influenced by quote unquote anarchism, even though there's a entire literature on the topic where they were influenced by individual anarchists. But these individual anarchists who influenced the early fascists were like Hollywood anarchists, like chaos for the sake of it, terrorism and edginess, and not really subscribe to any form of philosophy of anarchism. Este, and when they established the Free State of Fume, they still have hierarchy, which flies in the face what anarchists has to do, what has to be. And who was the only country in the world that recognized the Free State of Fume? The USSR under Lenin, because forced collectivization, centralization, as the Bolsheviks did, if they were copied by the fascists. In fact, Nikolai Bukharin, a Marxist-Leninist, in the 12th Congress of the Communist Party in 1923, described the Italian fascists as this, and I quote, adopted and applied in practice the experiences of the Russian Revolution in terms of their methods of combat. In fact, if one regards them from the point of view, that is, from the point of view of the techniques of their political methods, then one discovers in them a complete application of Bolshevik tactics, in the sense of rapid concentration of forces and energetic action of tightly structured and military organization. The same another quote from Leon Trotsky, and I quote, Mussolini stole from the Bolsheviks. Hitler imitated the Bolsheviks and Mussolini. Another quote from a Leninist theoretician, Tony Cliff, analyzed of Lenin one-man management, and I quote, a number of effective methods of disrupting the unity of workers as a class. One of the most important of these is the fostering of competing between workers by means of piecework system. He added that these were used by the Nazis and the Stalinists for the same purpose. Este, and according to the anarchist historian Maria Louise Bernet, I quote, thus the Bolshevik entered into commercial agreement with Mussolini's fascist government soon after he assumed power in Italy. On the morning after the murder of the socialist deputy Matteotti, the Soviet ambassador called on Mussolini. The very same time when the German communists were planning to overthrow the state, the Russian government was not only making trade agreements with the German capitalist government, but even making secret agreements where the Germans could invade the military terms of the Treaty of Versailles by establishing armed factories and training armies in Russian soil, where a clash occurred in the claims of Soviet foreign policy prevailed over the need of the revolutionary class struggle. And during the summer of 1923, joint meetings were held by both communists and fascists. Speakers urged an alliance with Soviet Russia against the Entente of Powers. So for several months, the German communists worked with the Nazis, going so far as to stage rallies and share podiums together. The communist leader, Ruth Fischer, even argued that, and I quote, he who denounced Jewish capital is already a warrior in the class war, even though he does not know it, end quote. This continued until the Nazi leadership placed a ban on further cooperation. We see a sample that Lenin's approach to socialism was basically capitalism in disguise. And we see many examples that first collectivization, using social welfare program when it's convenient, and then strong labor forces and stuff like that, and centralized authority, making an elitist group that only an elite few can be this instead of that, right? And like I said, socialism, under the Marxist definition, never worked or never been in practice because they never even tried socialism to begin with, because they become a class in their own right, becoming counter-revolutionary in their own right. So when he says the socialism never worked or socialism never tried, you never heard of anarchism. Because they every time they try to succeed, and coincidentally, like in Spain, for example, or Korea, or Ukraine, for example, the Marxists joined forces with the fascists and monarchists to crush the anarchists because they were the only one to actually put it in practice and succeed every fucking time. So I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Again, links in the description. In the description, all the sources, and I hope I try my best to like separate into categories, even though I suck at English. So I hope see you guys next time.